Hi and welcome. Today we are very honored, Nathalie and myself, to have a very special guest, Gabriel Guerrero from Mexico. And just to make sure that his presentation is done the right way, who are you, Gabriel?
Well, that's a very deep question if we go philosophically, but if we just pretend to make this as brief as possible, I am, as you mentioned, I'm Mexican. I am involved in neuro-linguistic programming since 1990. That's already 32 years. I was co-trainer and agent for Richard Bandler for 10 years for every country of Spanish-speaking country. I co-train over 20 programs with Richard. And aside from that, I've studied many other things as well. But interesting thing is I got into NLP because I was a professional tennis player at the time. I turned professional in 1990, and I hired a psychologist, a sports psychologist who had been training with John Grinder and other neuro-linguistic programmers. And that was my first introduction to that fascinating field, not only NLP, but everything related to the mind. Uh, and then I became an assistant for this person working with different professional football or soccer teams, depending what the country, how we call that. And other athletes, other performers in different sports. And then I became more and more fascinated with neuro-linguistic programming and other mind-related fields, and started studying here and there all over the place. And eventually I got to Richard Bandler, as we three of us consider him the genius behind neuro-linguistic programmer. He's a co-founder, but creative genius behind NLP. And I met him in 1998. And eventually in 2000, I started becoming his agent and co-training with him in 2001 for the rest of the decade, and learning a lot from that experience. And nowadays, the interesting thing is I have come back to sports because being with Richard, I kind of got away from sports. And because today we're going to be talking about the mind in sports and neurolinguistic programming applied in sports. An interesting thing is I got back into sports a few years ago, helping my kid become a competitive golfer at the time. And now also starting to train myself to start playing tennis again, not professionally, just in the seniors. Yeah, that's true. After 30 years, it is called the seniors. When you're 51 years old, as I am, it's now the senior tour. But still just practicing, training, and working out to start playing some tournaments. So that's me. That's Gabriel. And it's a pleasure to be joining you both. I know Nathalie for 20 something years, and I met you, what was it, like, I think probably 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it's an honor to be joining you, because I know for a fact that you're two of the most professional neurolinguistic programmers I know. And believe me, anyone watching this, I don't say that lightly. I don't say that for anyone. I know you are professional. You are very serious about studying, preparing yourselves, preparing every session you're doing with people, and well, you're in the most neutral country in the world, at least on paper. I don't know if that's a fact, but everyone talks about Switzerland as the neutral country in the world, and home of probably the best tennis player in history, debatable with a couple of other tennis players, Djokovic and Nadal, but without a doubt, one of the three best tennis players in history. So I'm honored to be joining you.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Gabe, for that introduction. And yeah, it's amazing how time flies. And I have had the honor to train with you, and to have many discussions with you regarding especially what brings us tonight is that the preparation that we have to provide or to facilitate to the athletes or the sports related persons, so the mindset that we need. And the first question I want to ask you is, how much difference does mental work make in sports?
It's a very important thing to understand, and even before answering that question, as you were introducing the question, I thought of something that's very important. One of the things that I love about sports and athletes is that they are used to practice. What does that mean? You as NLP trainers, master trainers, one of the things that frustrated me a lot doing some of the training is that people do once anchoring, let's say, and they go like, well, okay, I got it. No, that's once. I mean, you still have to practice it to get good at it. And usually athletes and from any sport understand that practice makes perfect, that practice is important. So having said that, how much of a difference the mental aspect of the game makes a difference in the results? It's something that I have said for many years, and it sounds strange, or for some people it sounds weird the way I say it, but it's, if you don't have the fitness, if you don't have the biomechanics, the technical aspect of it, if you don't have the tactics, the strategy for whatever sport it is, mental work, it's pretty much useless. And that sounds weird because we're going to be talking about how useful it is. But it is important to understand that what makes a difference between the winner of a game and the loser of a game, let's say professionally, football, tennis, golf, whatever, it's the mental side, it's the mind. So it is the most important thing if and only if they do have the fitness, they do have the technical aspects, if they do have the strategy. Because I have worked with athletes that they don't have the right preparation for it, they don't have the right mechanics for it or whatever. And even if you work with them with their attitude and their mentality and their concentration and all those things, of course it's a positive thing for their life, but it's not going to make so much of a difference on the competition. And I'll use myself as an example. I never had a coach teaching me tennis. I had a few lessons when I started out, and then I was just training by myself. And I was into a clinic that it was just like many kids, good level kids, and they would just be throwing us balls, pretty much not correcting much of what we were doing. But I got pretty good, decent enough to play professional tennis. But the reason I wasn't able to get a higher ranking or become better is because there were other limitations other than the mind, because I hired the psychologist, as I mentioned. So I started having a much better attitude than others, but I didn't have the tactical side of it. I wasn't as smart in which shots to use at what points or whatever. My technique was, while being pretty good, now I see it, and nowadays we have smartphones, and so I record myself and I go like, why the hell no one ever told me to fix that? So there were a few things, it's minor things, but still, if those things are not there, it's very difficult for the mind to make that much of a difference. However, it made a difference in my life, that I even got involved in training others in this. So it is always going to be something very useful for the athlete. If anyone is the parent of an athlete is going to be watching this, it is really worthwhile to get into this, because it's going to be useful for the rest of their lives. Now, if it is supposed to help them win, it is important to do this, but also to cover the other aspects, because otherwise it's just not going to work out. Like I would say, most people say Rafael Nadal or even Novak Djokovic to be the two of the strongest mentally in the game of tennis in history, but they have perfect technique. There's a couple of things that you can change here or there, but it's pretty much perfect. And they have a perfect fitness. and they have very good tactical strategies. And so, yes, it makes a difference. That's why they were able to compete with someone like Roger Federer, which is probably the best biomechanics in history, the most talented player. Not necessarily the strongest mentally, but that's because of one reason, because he was so good. It was very hard. He was never playing with someone better than him. It was pretty much from the very beginning, he was at the level of anyone. So, and the other guys had to overcome playing against Roger Federer. So that was that. But so to be concrete with the question, to the answer of your question, it is very, very important as long as the other things are taken care of.
Okay, thank you. And you talked about motivation, but what else does a mental trainer do apart from motivating the athlete?
That's a very interesting question, because so many times people will say, oh, so you're a sports psychologist, and so you motivate the athlete. And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes we have to do some motivation, sure. But most times that's not the important things that we do when we're doing this kind of a thing. Because if the athlete is not motivated already, usually it's not already at a good level. It's not going to be a high performance athlete. If we're going to be working, and let's make a difference here as well, if we're doing our kind of work with an amateur, with a recreational athlete, yeah, sometimes they need some extra motivation and here or there. But if we're working with professional athletes, as sometimes we do, these guys are already motivated. The last thing they need is our motivation. I mean, they don't become professionals without motivation. Usually what we do, it's depending on the sports, one thing or the other might be more important, but it's concentration. I mean, we all have lived this from being young kids and studying and so on. So just concentrate, but no one teaches us how to do that. It's just concentrate. Okay, sure. Well, it's not like something we are taught how to do. So concentration is one that's important. How to manage our emotions, it's another thing that we do with athletes, because the biggest limitation on many professional athletes, it's how they handle their emotions. Like there's this guy in tennis, Nicolas Kyrgios. He's really talented, not very disciplined in many ways, but also he can't control his emotions really. I mean, he can go crazy at any point. So that's one of a very important thing. It happened with let's say one in Mexico. We had one time in a World Cup. Now that it's approaching, Luis Garcia, he was a pretty good player. He played in Spain, but on one game he was hit a lot, so he got back on the other player and he got a red card. And so we had to play the last few minutes with only 10 players because he couldn't control that anger, the emotion. So handling emotions, managing emotions, it's one of the important things that we also work with athletes, so that they understand that however they feel at any given moment in time, it's going to either help them or hurt them. And so that's how to handle those things. Another thing that I like working with people, with athletes, and this is one that a lot of people don't really think of, it's what we would refer to as the mentality. Mentality, depending which definition you look for, but it's the way you think in every day. And many athletes, even if they are really talented or they are really good, sometimes they don't believe they are as good as they can be, or as good as they are even already are. And so many players in different sports just hold back because they don't believe they can do more. Or they go like, well, yeah, but that's, let's say again, Roger Federer. Yeah, that's Roger Federer. Instead of thinking, I'm going to beat him. It's like, no, yeah. I remember when I started playing, not professional, at first the national juniors, we would get to the draws with all the matches, and it would be so funny. Like people would go like, oh, I play this guy, then I'm gonna win, then I go here, and then here I lose. We haven't even stepped into the course, into the court in that case, and people are already thinking which matches they're gonna win and which matches they're gonna lose. I remember one time working with a kid. This kid, of course, nowadays he's not a kid, but back then he was, I think, 11 or 12. And so I had him do something we call shadow tennis, which is pretty much visualizing, but making movements. So you get a racket. I was prepared for this. And so you start playing as if you were actually playing a match. And so you serve and you return, but you're playing no one. You're just in the middle of nowhere, field, living room, if there's enough space, and you're playing out a match, but it's in your mind. And this kid started 15 love. He started winning. Then 15 all. Well, it was a passing shot from the opponent. 30-15, 30 all. And he ended up winning him a set. Like, I remember it was like 7-5, like really close match. And then I said to him, you almost lost. And there was no opponent. That's the crazy thing. It's like how, and this was just a reflection of him trying to be realistic, but in a way also it was representing how little he believed he could actually win every point. Like, I can confess, a good friend of mine, his name is Pedro. He was pretty good in juniors, and he injured his back, and professionally he only got to, I think it was like 400 in the world. But he was really good, really, really good. When he was like 16, he was beating professionals already, many professionals. And he's the only guy that ever beat me one set, 6 love, that I didn't win 1 point. So it is possible to do it. I mean, I never won a set without losing a point. I lost 1 or 2 points here or there with a player that was lower my level. But this guy did it to me, and it only reflects that it is possible. I mean, you can, but many people, even in their minds, they don't allow themselves to do that. Or they're playing golf, they're hitting, and then they're, but I missed that putt. Why would you miss a putt if you're just in your imagination? Well, why would that fail? Oh, I hit the ball, I went left or right or whatever. What? There's no ball. There's nothing there. I remember one anecdote I want to share with you guys. I was talking with Anders Haglund. Anders used to do a lot of NLP trainings. He's not doing NLP trainings anymore, but he used to be a professional golfer. He's worked with other athletes over the years. But one time he was working with a PGA professional, and this guy called him up. He's like, I'm on the range, on the practice area, and I'm very nervous. Why? We've been working for a long time, and you're a pretty good player. Why are you nervous? Oh, on one side I have Phil Mickelson, and I have Ernie Els, and there's Tiger Woods, and the guy didn't thought he belonged there. So Anders just said something very, I still remember his exact words. He said, like, okay, let's do something. Place a ball right in front of you and take whatever club you want in your hands. Okay, now close your eyes. Said, imagine that time. Remember, he actually went for remember a time when you won that tournament that it was in Japan. I remember he said, like, and you played perfectly. Okay, now imagine hitting the ball. How's the ball? Where's the ball? What happened? And the guy went like, oh, it was really far and straight and a great shot. Okay, now again, open your eyes. Where's the ball? And the guy went like, right in front of me. I mean, everything was just in their imagination. He said, okay, now close your eyes again. Remember that time that you played horrible the other day and it was a dog? Okay, yeah. But now imagine hitting the ball. What happened? He said, well, the ball just went, it was a shank, it's called. And so it went to the right and terrible. I said, open your eyes. Where's the ball? He said, what do you mean, where's the ball? Like, yeah, where's the ball? Still in front of me. In front of me. He says, exactly. Golf is a physical game. It's not about the mind. And it was funny because he was the mental teacher, but he was saying, like, you have to execute the stroke. It's everything else you're doing in your mind. If you're nervous because it's this person here or there, the problem is you're using your mind in a way that you shouldn't. You just should be focusing. Again, we go to concentration, focusing on hitting the ball. Forget about the rest. It doesn't really matter. You're not in Japan. You're not in the other place. It's whoever is next to you doesn't really matter. It only matters how you execute the stroke. So that's interesting in that sense, because we need to teach, and when I say we, I talk about the three of us. When we work with athletes, we have to teach them how to use their mind, and sometimes that means not using it the way they use it. Like a lot of times when I was professionally playing, I got a lot of professionals saying, Gabriel, you play really well, but you think too much. Stop thinking. And I would imagine because I couldn't get what the not thinking meant. Of course, over the years, I learned about uptime, the NLP exercise, and I practiced meditation or whatever, but it was about just executing and not having the mind being in the middle of the way. So we actually work a lot with the mind, not so much about motivation. I remember the question, okay? But it's not so much about a motivation, like, yeah, you can do it. Sometimes it's okay to do a work on that, but it's mostly about concentration, handling emotions, and other things that usually get in the way. Motivation, again, when you have to motivate a professional athlete, usually it's not a good sign because they are not really enjoying what they're doing. Like, no one had to motivate me to go practice when I was doing it. It's someone had to motivate me to stop doing it. It was the other way around. Like, there's a party, it's like, yeah, well, I have to practice. What? People will go like, are you crazy? But because you love what you're doing. So usually people confuse the sports psychologist with a motivation guy. And again, that's not really as often what we need. Usually we have to work more with aspects of even believing in themselves, having confidence, trusting themselves, and that makes a whole of a difference.
There are so many questions that come to my mind with all that you are saying, but I have a question from Adrián Hernández that he is a coach, a swimming coach, and his question is, what is the correct state to go into an event? Is it to be relaxed? Because we used to tell, okay, relax yourself. But if you are too relaxed, then what happens? Is it motivated? And perhaps, and that joins another question from Jaime González Buganza that says how to manage the night before, because the athletes have that nightmares the night before, so they don't rest, and the day of the event they are perhaps not in the best state. Or is it excited? What would be the best way to manage the night before and to be in the event?
Love the questions. I was thinking, well, I want to take like 45 minutes to answer that. Okay. Well, first of all, and I was going to be starting with this, my pronunciation isn't perfect for you guys watching. I haven't taught in English in several years, so bear with me. But very interesting questions, very useful. For once, I work with a swimming team some years ago, and starting with that question, the proper state or the right state for competing, it actually depends on the swimmer, right? on the athlete. If we go to other sports, on the team I was working with, there was this girl. I still follow her. She's winning a lot in the college in the US, and she was just a fraction of a second slower to go to the Olympics, to the last Olympics. She's really good. She's Andrea Sansores, that's her name. I truly still believe she's going to make it to the Olympics in the future. She's 21, I think now. She was, when practicing, she was kind of like, yeah, well, whatever. She wouldn't do that much of an effort. When she got into competition, she was a lion. She was so convinced. She was so fierceful. And with her, it was more of actually, as kind of contradicting what I said earlier, but it was motivating her to practice. I mean, she was motivated to compete, but not so motivated to practice. The right state, she had a great state for competing. She was lacking some preparation because she didn't have the right state for practice. It was more like something she had to do, and she enjoyed being on the pool, but not so much putting a big effort. There was another girl She now lives in Panama. All of them were Mexicans, but at this time she lives in Canada. She was very driven. Every practice she would beat everyone because she was in there, but she would be too nervous on competitions, and that would get her muscles tighter. So she would need more relaxation. So the proper state, it actually depends on the swimmer, because some of them need to be more relaxed because otherwise they're tense, and that doesn't allow the movements to flow. But other swimmers actually need to be more fired up. When I played, I eventually figured out what kind of music helped me to go into the right state. And I've said this for years, and people can make fun of me because it's something that is actually funny. But I ended up figuring out that it was not all this 80s music I always loved, but the music that was perfect for my state before competing was Christmas music. Not any Christmas music, but I would listen to Oh Holy Night and all the arrangements for Oh Holy Night, and it would be April, and I would be listening, Oh Holy Night, the stars are brightly shining, and I would be going like, yeah, because it was a state of, I was happy, relaxed, but motivated. And so it was my trick. Fortunately, I could use headphones. No one was aware of what I was listening to. They would be imagining maybe Rocky, or whatever rock music. At the time, I was listening to Oh Holy Night before the match. But I use this example because I found with different athletes, some people need to be more fired up before the competition. Some need to relax because they are too fired up and they get tense. So there's no one specific state that I would recommend for the swimmers, for a team working. It would be more like figuring out with each one of them what's the best thing that will work for them. And then you mentioned, and you connected it to the other question, that it's very, very interesting because it's what to do the night before. There's something I learned from my first teacher in sports psychology and stuff. We used to call him the ninja because he would do ninjutsu. He had something he called a System 5. From that, I took some of the elements, and I developed something I called Strategic System 6. And why is the 5? Why is the 6? He used to talk about 5 different moments in a competition that you need to have a strategy, a specific strategy for. Not only a state. You understand, you as neuro-linguistic programming trainers, and so Mr. is Master Trainer, of course. One of the things that is important, it's not only just a state, but a strategy, a sequence of thoughts. And my first teacher didn't understand that part, but he knew that you need to have a strategy for the night before, just as you mentioned. Yes. He would call it the before strategy because it's, for some athletes, it's the night before. Some are just that morning, because they compete in the afternoon, and that's that morning. The night before, they don't even care. They're nothing, but in the morning, they get all tense or this or that. So it's before, whether it's the night before or the morning or both. Then it's at the beginning, he would call it, but that was pretty much like the very few minutes before the competition and the first few minutes of the competition, depending what it is. If you're swimming 50 meters, it's already over. They're already over. It's just like that when they get ready, set, and that's at that point. Then he would have a strategy, or he would suggest we would have a strategy for when things are going well. So let's say in a football game, it's you're winning or you're controlling the game. Maybe you haven't scored, but you have control of the ball or whatever. If you're a tennis player, maybe you have a break up, or you're pretty much in control of the game. That's when you're winning. And then have a strategy when you're losing. Sometimes you're behind in the score, or in a sports, let's say like swimming, maybe you are just behind the leaders. So it's when you're losing, when you're not doing so well. And he had a 5th one, was the important moments. He would call it the key moments. let's say in swimming, it's when they, I don't know how to say this in English, but when they turn around, go the other way, that whole doing they call it la flecha in Spanish, but I don't know in English, but when they do the whole flipping and going forward, that is very important. A lot of swimmers lose there. They were winning and they lose their advantage. So that's an important point. In football games, it's like the free shots or the penalties even, or a corner kick, or all those things are kind of like important moments. In tennis, playing tennis is break points, set points, so those are kind of like important moments. But this teacher didn't have the sixth one that I added, which is once it's over. Because many athletes, once it's over, whether they win or they lose, they don't know what to do with their mind. Yes. And so maybe they have a next game. It happens with Nathalie and myself. We very well understand that Mexico can have a great win and they beat France in South Africa, and the next game they lose to whatever. I mean, they could have faced a kindergarten team they would have lost because their mind was already still celebrating the win and not focusing on the next game. But the other thing also happens, people that lose and they carry that loss for months or years sometimes. It's like almost like having a trauma for them. So it's also important what to do when the competition is over, when the match is over, or whatever it is. Now, going back to the question, like the night before, again, if we take that as the before the competition, similar to what I said about the swimmer, it's different for different athletes. Some people need to have fun. You see it in football professional teams. I've worked with people from Real Madrid and really professional, really good teams. Some like playing cards or doing something that they're having fun and laughing at this. Some watch movies, because some need to be more kind of like in a joyful state. Some need to be more in a relaxed state. No one needs to be very hyped up, because usually they get tired and the next day they are not in the right state. So the night before, usually, I mean, there can be an exception, but for most athletes, it's not a good idea to be all wired up. Yeah, I can be, blah, blah. It's just wasting energy before the competition. Usually the night before is resting or having fun, having a laugh. I do not recommend, but I do know some athletes do actually have a drink or something, so to relax. So that's the night before. It's important. But the other thing that you mentioned, well, it's not you just read the question, but really got me is when you said like having nightmares. Yeah. Because we all know our dreams are pretty much just some manifestation of our unconscious. So I was thinking, I've probably once had a nightmare of a competition, but it was kind of like, it would be more like a dream, like imagining the whole thing. I had nightmares of doing programs with Richard. I had those all the time. I still had one like 3 weeks ago. Like, Lionel's not here. The speakers are not connected. Oh, we're gonna be starting. I got nightmares every single year we were doing programs with, like getting stressed out that things were not there. But that it's a reflection of beliefs and worries and different things. So in that, when athletes are actually even having nightmares, I would work, of course, in relaxation and learning to sleep and have a good rest, but also on the beliefs they might have, because it might also be showing a lack of confidence in certain things. Like, I know in some ways I like to control a lot of things. So when I could not control what Lionel was going to be doing or other things in the room, then I would have nightmares about things that were not really under my control. So in my nightmares, I would be doing everything myself at the very end, like connecting this and where was this guy, and then just doing everything myself. When I was competing, because I was in a individual sport, playing tennis, there was no nightmares. I mean, like, maybe I remember one time that I didn't have the right racket. It was kind of like I had to play with a racket and I had kind of like a baseball bat or something. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, what the hell? I cannot play with this. How can I play with this? And I've had them with golf, that I never did it professionally. I just do it for fun, but I like competing. This is a funny nightmare, because other players I'm playing with are playing at a golf course and I am at the same course, but I have to hit the balls between, like I'm inside of a room. And so I have to avoid furniture on the swing, and I have to just get it through a window. And I'm going like, it's kind of like, this is not fair. Like they don't have this obstacles in the way. So that's really weird if we go into a psychoanalysis to understand why I do that to myself. But again, I would go back with a person having even nightmares. And I understand it's not like a terrible nightmare, but how much confidence they really have that at that point. So maybe before going to sleep, doing an exercise with some anchoring, some latitudes, whatever technique we can teach them, breathing exercises to access, to elicit confidence so that they go to bed fully confident on what they're going to be doing. Because that way is usually the dreams are going to be nicer than if they're just thinking like, what if? So I would guess that. And again, before going to sleep, every athlete needs to realize what works best for them. Some is just, so they have rituals. Almost every athlete has rituals. Some people just, again, are with a friend, or some people just watch Netflix or watch this or watch that. And I always love the interviews to professional athletes when they ask them about this, to hear the differences between different athletes.
Okay, thank you. And now let's go to the other side of the spectrum. And what can make the difference when both competitors are in the zone, are in their best game?
That's a really good one as well. When they're both in the zone, if we say we define that the zone is that they're mentally both in a really great place and stuff, I think that's usually, depending on the sport a little bit, but it usually is going to come down to tactics, to strategic thinking. I also like to cover that, even though that's more for the let's say the code, the football, the coach, or the tennis, like how to play. But I like to cover a little bit of that with my students, because it's going to come down to strategy. It's like a chess game. And so both players are really in the zone, let's say. I mean, chess is kind of weird in that sense, but it's going to be the one that's smartest. So, for instance, using tennis again as an example, one of the best tennis players in Mexico in history, Jorge Lozano, he was #1 in doubles at one point in the world. He was 15 singles. He just posted a few weeks ago, he said, having a winner on the game is as valuable as but in the different in the opposite direction than having an unforced error. Said, if you don't have a very clear shot to make a winner, just get the ball in. Don't try to force a winner, because you can get an unforced error. And it sounds, for some people, go like, oh, you should be more aggressive. He's just talking about tactics, and that's very smart. You see it with, I'll use an example from some years ago, Andre Agassi. Andre Agassi was very talented. He was a really good player, but he didn't become #1 in the world and as dominant as until he hired Brad Gilbert, the coach. He used to be a tennis player himself, who wrote the book called Winning Ugly. Because he said, it's not about winning pretty or doing it, it's how you win. And so he would have specific tactics that everyone in the world, and I mean everyone in the world, start copying. Like if the ball, it's a deep shot, it's very back on your court, you just go cross court, because there's more length and the net is lower. So it's the highest percentage shot. If you have a shorter shot and it's over the waistline, you can go down the line, which is a low percentage shot, but you can take control of the point. And he had different strategies. And what made a difference when two players were on the zone usually would be the tactics. Usually, I mean, it could be, sometimes it would be a few other aspects. But if they are both in the zone, it's going to come down to who's smartest at the right time. And depending on the sport, sometimes it's just a little bit of luck. I mean, I'm thinking golf. It's happened that two are playing amazingly and both hit a great shot, but one bounces on a small rock that bounces a little bit to the side. And so that's pretty much luck. No one could thought of that. But depending on the sport, it could be the tactics, and some others. Certain sports, I would say, let's talk about also team sports. Both sports might be on the zone, but it would be more the integration, the compenetration they have between the players, how they play along. So it's a little bit hard to have an answer for that. Or it would happen with talent. Roger Federer, again, in tennis, he was too talented. So if he was in the zone and Rafael Nadal was in the zone, just Roger's talent was way too much. So that would make a difference.
You are talking mostly about sports that are individual.
Sure.
Of course, you talked about tennis, and we can have a strategy in doubles. But what about, for example, football or football soccer, when it's not depending entirely on you? Because we have a question from Rossana Huerta. She says, okay, how to overcome, so her question is how to overcome when you lose, but it didn't depend on you directly. So, but I think it's a very important thing to address, how to manage a team.
Sure.
So what can you share about that?
I can share that I don't care about team sports.
That's not true. I have seen you play soccer.
Just kidding. Well, it's an interesting thing, and I get a lot of people, usually moms. It's usually moms calling me up that they want me to work with their kid, that it's on a football team, and they get frustrated because the team is not winning or they are not as committed as the kid is. And it's a very difficult thing, because in order to make, you have to teach, if let's take two different scenarios. One of them is you're going to be working with a team. If you're going to be working with the whole team, it is very important to get everyone on the same page, as it's often said. Not necessarily treating them all the same, but having them all in the same effort, and understanding it is a team effort. In those cases, sometimes you're going to find a player that takes it too personal, and if the team loses, even though if they're all playing together, they start blaming others and this and that. And in those cases, it's very, very important to work on, again, beliefs, mentality. Like, if you're going to be on a team sport, it is like they often say in the US, there's no I in team. Although I loved this Kobe Bryant's answer to that when Shaq told him that, Shaquille O'Neal said, there's no I in team. And Kobe said, like, but there's an I in win. And so that was a good comeback. But often it's important to work with the beliefs of the player, the kid, if it's a kid, even more important. And if you're going to be in a team sport, you have to be part of the team. Let's say American football, the NFL. One of the biggest winner of all time is Tom Brady. He's won 7 Super Bowls. Every time that they tell, like, in interviews, it's like, you make this, it's like, this is a team effort. He always answers that. And probably deep inside, he knows that he makes that team better. But he always replies the right answer, because he knows everyone on the team needs to understand that. He might just put the team on his shoulders because he's a quarterback and this, but he's always telling them, this is a team effort. I can't do it without you. I can't do it without you. And you can't do it without me. So it's working on the beliefs of the athlete that it is a team effort. Now, let's go to the other scenario, that we're only working with one football player, but not the whole team. And in those cases, it's very important for the player to understand that he can only do what he can only do. Duh. Sounds very obvious, but it's their own performance is going to be evaluated individually in certain ways. Like I worked with a kid that he was in the 3rd division in Spain. His uncle hired me, and he knew his team wasn't that good, but he knew there would be some visors. I think that's how they call them, visores in Spanish, and they were just they are there at the games watching for talent to take them to a better team. And so in his case, it was working like, if they don't give you a good pass, you can't do nothing about it, but it's not going to be good for you to get mad, because even these guys watching, they're going to see how much you support the rest of the team. So even individually, to become a little bit egotistical in terms of making it like, it is about me. I want these guys to see me as good as I am. So I am going to do everything I have to do, and I'm going to be supportive of the rest, because that's going to make a good impression on these guys. So it's slightly different depending on the situation, whether we're only working with that, or if it's a team, it really is about working the whole team's belief system. It's like you can have Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the best in the world. I mean, depending who you ask, of course, but he and Messi were 2 of the best for many years. Now we can have a few others in the mix. But he got to Manchester United last year, and many other players were not doing a good job. I mean, he can't be the goalkeeper. So if in many games they were getting 2 or 3 goals, he can't do nothing about that.
Right.
Even as great as he has been. Or Messi, you send him to Argentina many times, and the team wasn't working. They were not winning as much as they could, because one player is not. It's going to make some difference, but it's not going to be able to carry the whole team. So when talking about team sports, that's very important, to get the whole team to understand that, and to understand each player has a different role. Let's say football is like the goalkeeper has a very specific job, but the people on the back on the court, the defense, or the guys on the forwards, same thing in basketball. Like when this Shaquille O'Neal told this to Kobe Bryant, Kobe was the one, the small guard, they call it in basketball, and he was the creator of plays. So he had to be more individual in his mindset than other players. But it is very important for him to understand still that other players needed him. Michael Jordan learned this. When he first started, he was winning every year the shooting title for the league, but the team was not winning. Mm. And then he still won the shooting titles, but he understood, he learned to play with a team. And even on practice, to be even harder than the coach on the rest of the team. Like he would start it earlier, he would end up later, he would give the best effort. So he would be teaching by example to some of the other players. So it's every time it's a team competition, it's a bit more complex in terms of there's more moving pieces, but everyone has to be in the same direction, have the same plan. It's like it's not about me shining, it is about us winning. And that's pretty much the mindset. And it's, in my opinion, of course, every case can be different, but in my opinion, most times it's about beliefs. It's like, I am the one doing it. Sure. I remember when, even in tennis, it's individual sports. And as you say, well, there's doubles. But we would play, I loved the competition that now it doesn't exist in Mexico. I don't know why, but we had the interclubs. So this club playing this club. So it would be playing 5 different matches. There was male singles, female singles, male doubles, female doubles, and a mixed doubles. And even if you played amazing and you win your point, you could still lose. So one of the things that we used to work a lot with as a team back then, because we won several competitions, were about understanding that it was not, I want to play singles. It's what's going to be best depending who we're facing, and what's going to work best for the team. So it would be many decisions were based on what's going to be best for the team, not necessarily individually. And so that applies to other team sports, because it's not how much goals you get, but how much you can have a team success. I actually going to add with something. I do remember this guy. Michel didn't met him, but you remember Emilio, the great Emilio.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm making it public. Emiliogram. When we would play many times Xbox, and we would get together, my friend Emilio and Omar and Edgar and myself, and we would play. The last few years, we would play on the same team because Xbox had this option where we could have one player. And so I would be one player and Omar another, Edgar another. And Emilio always wanted to be Rafael Marquez from Mexico, the defender. But he would, at the middle of the game, he would be on the other side trying to score goals, and we'll go like, Emilio, you're a defender. I mean, but I want to score a goal. Yeah, but you can't pick you can't pick a defender and decide to be a forward. So it was kind of like we would always have the same debates, but it's a good example. It's like he had to understand everyone had a role. Even Edgar had a role at one point that we were about to win the World Cup. In that competition, it took us like 8 days because you had to win every match and every night after the workshops. And we were there, and Germany, we were 1-1, and then Germany scores 2-1, only 1 minute left, and Edgar accidentally just pulled off the plug, and we had to restart the match. It was an accident, I'm sure. we even needed to have one to be in charge of not letting us loose and doing whatever it was needed. But jokingly, but what I'm saying is like everyone has a role. So when we're doing a team effort, it's what's one had to do with the other. Like when I was co-training with Omar many times, as you were there, Nathalie, says, like for certain topics, Omar would be the one explaining, and I would be giving examples. And we would penetrate really well in understanding which one was doing what on different topics. So and sometimes I would be teaching on my own, and sometimes he would be teaching on his own because of the topic. But what was best for the training? I remember one time I was doing another one with this guy. I won't mention his name because you know him, and Paulo's not. I'm not supposed to mention his name. But we only once we did a workshop together, and it was terrible because he would interrupt me when I was doing something. Okay, so he wants to say it, but then in the middle of what he was saying, like, Gabe, tell them the story of, like, what? It was kind of like, it was not, it was obvious for people there that there was no a real plan. It was just do whatever. So it, again, in those cases, what happened with Paulo was the first time he was doing teaching, and there was Richard there, and he would show up at some time or whatever, and so he wanted to shine, but he was not taking into consideration the training itself. So, and sometimes it is about shining. Sometimes one has to shine because it also connects with some people. Some people are more affiliated with someone which is more low key. Let's say, even talking sports, more of a mellow personality, and some other fans connect with the star that it's always shining. So it is about what's going to work best for the purpose of that. So it's working on the whole team, whether it's doubles like in tennis, 2 people, or it's 11 in a soccer field, in a football field. It's like what's going to be best for the whole team at that point. I'm not doing any side metaphors or anything. I'm just speaking straightforward sports.
Thank you. We also have a question about the mind from Carla Islas, who is a swimmer in the United States. And she's asking how to avoid those auto-sabotage thoughts that every athlete has. And the second part is when to give up.
Now, it's very funny, and I know you guys know this because you are experts as well in NLP and language. It's that every athlete has. It's
and
like
every is written in bold.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Like, and if you could have made it this big, it would have been like every athlete. Well, first, bad news for Carla. I think it was. Yeah, Carla. First, bad news for Carla is not every athlete has those sabotage thoughts. It is often, I do agree with that. A lot of athletes, and that includes myself many times in the past when I was a professional athlete, will have those thoughts, but it's not everyone. I'm still amazed every time I met someone that they just don't have those. I mean, I just go like, that's so cool. I mean, I wish I never had, I was like that, because there's many athletes that don't have that kind of thoughts. But how to avoid them? Again, that's an interesting presupposition, as we call it in NLP, because it's like I am not thinking them. I'm just trying to avoid them. Like they just appear out there. It's like, whoo, whoo, let me avoid this one. It's kind of like the Matrix, avoiding bullets. I would say the first step I do with athletes in that sense is teach them that they are driving the bus, as Richard would say. They are running their brain. They are having their thoughts. We don't have thoughts just random. We are generating those thoughts. So my first thing I would work with Carla or any other athlete I work that have that kind of a thing is to help them understand, first an understanding that they are not a victim of thoughts, but they are thinking them. And after that, it's just working, and we could do it with submodalities or anchoring, different techniques of NLP that if you're really interested, Carla, you can train with Michel and Nathalie, and a practitioner and master practitioner and whatever else they do, to run your own brain, how to use your thoughts, how to change if you're thinking of something, how to just turn the picture white and have a different one, or just kind of like changing channels. There's many different techniques and options on how to change that, but it starts from understanding that you are thinking it. It's not that thoughts just appear, because a lot of people go like, oh, a thought appeared in my mind. It's like, well, not really. You actually did something unconsciously, but you thought it. So first of all is that. So how to avoid them is, I would say, I'm going to be a little bit Richard Bandler for a minute. It's like, just stop it. I love it when he said like, stop it, stop doing that. It's like, how to avoid them is just not having them. I mean, if you are generating them, you just don't have them. I know, Carla, that this sounds like, yeah, sure, but if I could, I would be doing it. Actually, you can, but you haven't learned how to. But it is about learning to control your own mindset and the thoughts you have, and being able to change them in an instant. I'll give you one trick that I learned from the ninja back then, and it was pretty good. I still teach it to every athlete I work with, because it's very simple for anyone. You don't have to have any experience whatsoever, and it's still useful. He would call it how do you call this? The match. You know how to light the cerillo phosphoro match. How do you light a match? He would say, like, anytime you have a bad thought, or you get angry, or you get upset or disappointed, it's like lighting a match. So a match, you can easily turn it off. You can just go, or you can just move it with your hand or whatever, with your fingers, and very Mexican. No, the thing is, and I like the example of blowing the match, because it's breathing. It says it's just get rid of it. It's just one match. If you allow it to continue to burn, then it's not just going to be one. You have many ones, many matches in a box. There's going to be maybe 5, 8, 10. You're not going to be able to do it, take it off just like this. You go, it's just going to burn your hand. It's not going to work. So you're going to have a glass of water and just go like, maybe to get it to take off the fire. The thing is then to get the thoughts, those limiting thoughts, those sabotage thoughts, whatever, when they appear, just get rid of them. Just inhale, exhale, and decide at that point to have a different thought. Sometimes the opposite thought. I can't do this. It's just like, I can. And it's just doing this. Of course, it sounds easier than it is done. That's why we teach other more profound techniques. But it's very interesting, because I have found that to work with many athletes, because as the ninja would say, if you don't get off those matches, then you'll go like, you get scared and you throw it away. And then the mattress goes off, and then the curtains, and then the whole house is burned. The firefighters come in, and then they put out the fire, but you have already lost the match, the competition, or you have retired, or whatever you've done. Now, I suspect, because of the way the question was asked, when it said when to quit, that sometimes some athletes go like, but I'm still not having the success I wish I had. And sometimes I get the thoughts like, yeah, maybe I'm not good for this, and blah, 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 or whatever. I again, to me, a very important thing there is consciousness, is really go deep in yourself and reflect, do you really want to do that? Because some people, when people are there just by stubbornness, but they are not enjoying it anymore, I would say that's the time to quit. Because it's like, if you're not enjoying it anymore, especially in sports, it's hard enough to be good if you're enjoying it and you're doing your best effort. If you are forcing yourself and not having results, it's really an unnecessary torture. So when to stop is when you're not enjoying it. If you are enjoying it, then work on your own thoughts so that you don't have limiting thoughts, you don't have sabotage thoughts, and you keep going forward. And dreams can come true. And if not, you can still have the satisfaction. I know when I retired from tennis and I went into paddle, and I became the number 3 in Mexico for 3 years on a different sport, similar sport, because it's very similar to tennis in many aspects. But I was really happy doing it. And then I decided to stop. And people went like, why would you stop being number 3 in Mexico and going to world championships or whatever? Because I didn't want to do it anymore. I mean, I was more into the NLP books, and it was all fault of Richard Bandler. Yeah, let's blame someone else. Just watching videos and stuff. So I was watching all those things, and I didn't really want to go practice anymore. And before that, I would love going practicing. So I went like, no, this is it. I should not continue doing it because it makes no sense. So the answer to the question when to stop is when you're not enjoying it anymore, especially if you're not having good results. Because if you're making millions of dollars, let's say maybe you're, again, Messi or Ronaldo, one of those guys, and you go like, well, if I play another season, I can get another 70, 80 million dollars. Well, I force myself. Okay, I'll agree to that. But if you're not making millions and you're suffering, just stop it and just walk away. But first, give yourself a chance of get rid of those negative thoughts, because that's usually a bad thing. It's not going to help you become better, and it's not help you once you retire eventually, to know that you give your best. I know I could have been better with given certain things, but I know I give my best when I was there. So I have no regrets in tennis. And there's always like, if I had this, if I had that, yeah, sure. But talking about my effort, I was there 100% every time until I decided to quit. So that's what I would suggest in that case.
And that brings me to another question. Is a champion born or is a champion made?
And this question that I often get, it's tricky, because I would say champions are always made, but sometimes they are also born. And some might go like, what? Like, let's say Messi, or let's say Roger Federer, 2 of the most talented athletes in their own sport. They were born with a talent. They were born with certain mind aspects as well, because some have that kind of a thing as well. But they worked at it. So they were made. I mean, they were born to some degree, but they were made. Like Tiger Woods, again, a kid that at 4 years old was shown on television. And then at 6, most people don't know this, but at 6, he was beating kids that they were 10 or 11. There's a huge difference with a 6-year-old, an 11-year-old, and he was beating them because he was already hitting amazing. He was born with a gift and with a talent, but he worked, as the saying goes, like his ass off. He worked so hard, so many hours. There were other talented players, like there's one guy in golf called John Daly, very talented. When people ask him how he practices, like with a beer, he loves drinking and he has a big belly, and he won several $1 million. He was really good. He was never as good as Tiger, of course. And he tells an anecdote I don't know how true it is or not, but he's mentioned this like 10 times on television. He gets along with Tiger Woods really well. He said like one time they were in a competition, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and he was drinking with the guys in the bar. And people, of course, react to drinking. And he said like, yeah, sure, it's already midnight somewhere in the world. So he would be drinking there, and it was the day before a competition. He was drinking with guys. And Tiger just went by, and he said like, hey, Tiger, come sit with us. Like, no, I'm going to the gym. So Tiger went to the gym, and then went back. Hey, Tiger, sit with us. No, I'm going to the range and practice. And it was just Tiger practicing all over the day. And he said like, it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were still drinking in the bar. And Tiger just went by and says like, hey, Tiger, sit with us. Why don't you sit with us? And John Daly says like, Tiger replied, if I had your talent, I could be sitting drinking, but I have to work at it. I don't know if Tiger said that. I don't necessarily agree, because Tiger was very talented, but that's a difference. So they were both champions. Of course, one was here, he won a couple of majors, the other one won 15 or whatever. So I would say some athletes are born with that special talent that it's just, you just see it, it's just there. I've seen it with different sports. But the ones that don't work at it just never get to become real champions. So a champion is born and made, but even if you're not born a champion, you can still make yourself a champion, because hard work is going to be much better in the end than just having talent. That would be my answer for that.
Thank you. And you probably know Marco Valerio Ricci from Italy. He is a master trainer in NLP. He's also a coach. And one of the questions that he often gets is the following: what if someone lost their swing? How can they get it back?
There's usually at every country club, there's a lost and found desk. So I would first go there, like, hey, guys, I lost my swing. Has anyone turned it in? That would be my first choice, but just kidding. With Marco Valerio, I know a great guy, great friend. That's an interesting question when people ask that, because usually it has to do with confidence. And there's a video that was at some time ago. It was on the web. I haven't seen it in a while, but it was Tony Robbins using NLP with Andre Agassi. Andre Agassi had been #1 in the world, but he was married to Brooke Shields, and he had drug issues and different things, and so he lost his ranking. And he got to, I think, like 170 in the world. So it was not like he lost his tennis swing, because I know this might be golf, but it was more about the confidence and the drive. So what Tony did was a very basic eliciting the state. Remember a time when you were really confident in your game and he gave him an anchor just to have the state he used to have when he was winning. Now, the other side for that Tony Robbins didn't mention, but Andre does in his book, is that he got his fitness coach to got him to first think, are you really willing to pay the price again? Like you were as a junior, on working hard every day and winning your way back to that. And so Andre thought about it, and he decided to do it. And they started working really hard as he used to work before he was a professional. So I've found that to happen a lot. Like even myself, I didn't play tennis for 25 years. It sounds like a lot, because it is a lot. 25 years. I stopped at 25. I retook it. I was 50 when I started playing again. Now I'm 51. Just recently, I started hitting the ball, and I know after a few minutes, I know I have the feeling. But in order to play well, when I played one match, I need to move. I'm not going to move like when I was 25, but as close as possible. And so I have to work hard as I used to, or even harder, maybe. And I wouldn't do it, because I'm not going to be 6 hours every day at the tennis club. But I still have to work hard for that. And that's the one thing that you go like, I asked one of my best friends, well, good friend from tennis. He's a very successful businessman, and he used to be he was number 3 in the world in juniors playing tennis. And I just asked him 2 weeks ago, how do you handle this, that you go and play being nearly 50, he's 49, and not being able to hit the ball as you used to? How do you handle that? I asked him, and he said, like, I just don't play anymore. And that's the easiest way out. And then we talked about it because we had a laugh, and it's like, if I'm not going to be putting out the hours, it's just not going to work out. I mean, I can do it just for fun, but we're similar in that sense. We're very competitive. It's like, so either you're willing to put on all the hours, or forget about it. So in one answer to Marco Valerio, because this happens in golf as well, it's like, many times when we lose the swing in golf or in tennis or whatever, any of these sports that have a swing, usually it has to do with confidence. Usually it has to be like, I'm not as confident. And just by having second thoughts, or in the case of golf, just a fraction of a second that you're tighter because of whatever reason, you hit the ball not in the perfect spot, not in the perfect angle, and so it's gone. So it is about eliciting the state of back when you did have the swing. And sometimes, in the case of golf, especially in tennis, not so much, sometimes you need someone external. Even Tiger has a friend that he uses for that records what he's doing and says, like, and compares when they had the good swing and they didn't. It's like, you're doing this that you were not doing. Like, sometimes that technical aspect in golf, it's very, very, very detail. In tennis, not so much. I mean, unless there's something very obvious, it's more about confidence. In golf, it is confidence, but it's also sometimes like there's a little slightly thing that you're doing that you were not doing, and so just fix that. So that's the easiest. It's really pretty fast. Tony Robbins worked with Andre Agassi half an hour. Of course, he started working hard on the gym and all those things, and it took him 6 months to get back to the great shape. But the confidence was there like that in half an hour, because he had already had that confidence. It was not like have someone have confidence that they've never had. It's a little bit harder. We can do it. We know how to do it, but it's harder than if you have already had it. It's just have them associate into the past experience of having that resource, having that confidence, and that usually it's good enough to have the first step. And again, in case of golf, is just comparing the swings, and sometimes it's just as dumb, but as important as just the way you grip the golf club. It's slightly an inch out of place, and that's making the whole difference in the swing. So that would be it.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned golf, I know that you are coaching your son, and I have a question from Mario Mancera, who is also coaching his daughter. He's a swimming coach, and he asks, how can you make this separation between being a dad and being a coach? And how can you make the athlete understand that in the pool or the golf
course,
you how do you make this I don't know, what's the strategy behind coaching your own kid?
Well, first, with the bad news, my kid is not competing anymore in golf. And this is part of the difficulty with this. There's very few stories of success for a coach, actually, of a dad being their kid's coach. It is possible, yes, you can do it, but it's hard. First of all, it's hard. Let me put it in stages. It's hard enough to deal with the parents of an athlete when they're kids. It's like when you're the coach, whatever it is, parents are getting involved all the time, and they're correcting their kids when they're not supposed to, or they are. I was just my little kids just started with tennis last week, and one of the coaches, because he's in the club, I used to be the champion many years ago, so most of the tennis instructors know me. There's a few new. a new professional there as well. So the ones that already knew me, when I got there with my kids, they went like, just help us here, just being with the kids and motivating them. And so I stayed. I wasn't supposed to stay, but I stayed and helping them out and saying a few things. And then like 45 minutes into it, the professional approached me, the club, and there was this guy from the US at coach Andre Agassi, Maria Sharapova, and many professionals. He was there visiting because he's going to be helping. And he sent the professional to tell me to get out of the court because I was a parent. Parents are not supposed to be there. Because they knew I played, they were very respectful, like trying to give me many explanations and I went like, I totally understand it. I said, I was only here because this other guy asked me to, the teacher said like, but I totally get it because it is a nightmare when the parents get involved in the training. So taking into steps, first thing is and I'll get to the question. First thing is to tell the parents, you're a parent, you're not a coach. You have to be the parent. So you're going to be motivating your kids, supporting them and paying for things that they need and embracing them when they lose and they're crying, especially when they're kids and they didn't do as well. Your emotional support and your financial support and your just mainly support, motivation. So let the coach be the coach. So this is when it gets tricky. And in this case, like how to have the kid understand the difference, because that's pretty much his question. It's hard because the coach, the dad is always going to be the dad. And while it's possible, most times it doesn't really end up really well. Steffi Graf had difficulties with her dad, Andre Agassi with his dad until many years later he forgave him or whatever. I said there's actually a very emotional speech of Andre Agassi at the Hall of Fame, and he mentioned that one time he was giving a lecture, already retired, and a man on the first row raised his hand and asked a question: how do you know when to stop being when do you know to be a dad and when you stop being a coach, when to stop giving advice to your kids? And Andre Agassi, he's telling the story. It's very emotional. I'll suggest anyone to look it up in YouTube. Andre Agassi Hall of Fame. That's going to be the how to find it. And he said like, and the person asking the question was my dad, because he knew it was a very torn relationship. And at that point, he was already retired. He said like, Dad, you told me when I was 4 years old that I was going to win Wimbledon. You told me at 6 years old that I was going to be in the Tennis Hall of Fame. You told me when I was blah, 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 that I was going to win this. And he said, and you told me when the very first year we met Steffi Graf that I should marry Steffi. And now they're married for many years now. So like, you know what the answer is? Never stop giving me advice. And it was very emotional because it's kind of like how they got together again. But it's very hard because for many years they didn't speak to each other because of that strained relationship. So I would suggest to talk to the kid and have them understand that there's two roles, but as a coach, always remember that you will always be the dad and not necessarily will always be the coach. Like I just saw an interview of a friend of mine, Gavin Palafox. He was interviewed here because he used to play. I used to practice with him some years ago, and now he has her kids in tennis, in competition, and they were interviewing him, and they said, and you bring a coach. He's a professional at a club, so he teaches, but he brought a coach for his daughters, and because he was coached by his dad. And again, that creates so much friction that it is possible. I don't want to sound negative in the terms that it's not possible, but it's very hard because sometimes you have to be really hard as a coach on the athlete, and depending on the age, the kid is just going to be like, why is my dad like that to me, or my mom? Because it happened to Jimmy Connors, and it happened to, there's many stories of that happening. So I would suggest as an option to have, if possible, some teams have an assistant coach. So like you can be the coach, but for certain things have the assistant coach or someone else be the one hard on the athlete, because the dad still has to be the dad. And let's just place ourselves in the position of the kid. So he gets jailed by the coach. It's like, yeah, blah, 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 do an effort. And usually they will go home, especially girls, happens a lot more than boys, go back home and complain about how she was treated by the coach.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, who she goes to complain with? To the mom. And so it becomes more of a marital conflict. So it's, if possible, have a third person involved, an assistant coach or something involved in that. And at some point, just let them fly free. Roger Federer was coached by his mom. They were a good relationship, but at some point it was just go and practice with whomever you want to. It's like, because sometimes parents also want to just keep their kids tied to them. And so it is absolutely possible. But and this touches with another workshop I often do, that it's called, well, translation would be something like teaching your kids to become the leaders of tomorrow or something. But the thing is, I said the most important things that kids need when they are younger, it's your support, the emotional support you give them and the love you give them and stuff. They don't need you to be, you can be hard, because that's also part of educating kids. But always remember that when you're 70 and they're 50, or whatever, depending on age, as John Laval would say, or Rich would say, like, they're going to be changing your diapers and they're going to be paying for your stuff. It's like, be nice to them. But I'll change it a little bit. It's like, when you're both grown-ups, it's already changed, but you're still going to be related and not necessarily competing in sports. So it's a bit hard, but it can be done, but be very careful.
Thank you. There's actually a second question from Mario Mancera, which is very interesting. Do you think it's important to prepare the athlete for the defeat?
Yes. When I mentioned the strategy, the system 6 for strategies and mental strategies, remember I mentioned the one that is when you're losing. It's going to happen to every athlete that you're going to be losing. Not necessarily you have lost or you have failed, but you're losing. That's going to be important to prepare them. But I also mentioned that I added that once you finish. So many athletes don't understand that when you lose, either you learn or you really lose because you burned. Exactly. That's a good way of saying it. Either you learn or you burn. Because most athletes in whatever sports are going to, at some point in their career, they're going to lose a lot. It's like interesting fact. I was just checking this the other day with my dad. In the history of the game, tennis, talking about tennis, professional tennis, there's only 30 players that have a winning percentage, that they have won more matches than lost. Only 30 in the history. In 100 years of competition, only 30 have won more matches than lost. You can be a very successful player and still have like a 50%, 50-50, or a 49, or maybe a 51, and that's already been very successful in history. Like the ones that have won the most, Roger, Djokovic, and Nadal, are around 80%. So they still lose at 20% of the times. So if you're not ready to handle defeat, most likely you will get frustrated and quit. It's like, so it's very important to prepare them for every loss and keep going. That's where I failed with my kid. And I can say that I failed in that sense. I tried to do it, but because being the dad and the coach, he would say, but you, when I said, this is good experience, I said, like, when you were playing, you didn't lose as much. I said, like, oh, you're absolutely wrong. The first time I went to national competitions when I was 14, I lost every match. Every match in the nationals. I mean, regional competitions, I would win a few matches. But nationals, I lost 6 nationals, 6 losses. Said I lost every single one of them in the first round. Like, so yeah, of course I lost, but I was not disappointed because of that. I was more encouraged to work harder. So I was trying to convey that message, but again, that's one part that it was hard for me to work with him as a dad and as a coach, that you're going to lose, and you're going to lose a lot. Like I mentioned in tennis, 80%, the best in this history. In golf, the most successful season, 1 year round success rate was Tiger Woods 2000. He won 32% of the competitions. That's not 100. That's still losing more than winning. And that's Tiger Woods, the best one in history. That's the best year. The second one was, I don't remember the year, but it was Jack Nicklaus, 26%, like 1/4 of the times in tournaments. So it is very important. Of course, if you're Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and Real Madrid, the team usually wins a lot. But before getting to that level, they're going to lose a lot of times, and they have to learn to lose and not get disappointed, and actually get motivated and going like, oh, I'm doing this better. What I say you often, and this applied to only half of the screen, I mean your side of the screen, it's one of the biggest problems with Latin Americans, especially in sports, is the lack of self-criticism. It's like we are, for some way, there either we have a very negative self-criticism, I'm terrible, I can do it, blah blah blah, that is not useful at all. Or they don't have self-criticism. It's like, oh, I'm perfect. No, you're not. You can still get better. Like so many professional athletes in Mexico, once they are good, they think they're perfect. It's like, no, you're not. Yeah, you can fail. Yeah, you have default. So I found out to be very, very, it probably translates to the world, but in Latin America, that's very, very common. It's like we either are very hard on ourselves, or we are just Juan Camané, so that I make a very Mexican statement. It's like, I'm Juan Camané, I can do anything. And that's not either, none of those choices are the best. It's I usually talk about having healthy self-criticism, which means, for everyone watching, it's like having questions, not necessarily being hard on yourself, but going like, how can I improve? What could I have done better? How can I learn from this? So having it more stated as a question, and a positive question that allows you to get better and grow and whatever. That's I worked with 3 different professional football teams in Mexico as an assistant. At one time, it was me, the lead mental coach. But it was, again, they get a little bit better, and they think they're the best in the world. And then or they start doing something bad, and they're the worst in the universe. They're like, oh, I'm terrible. It's like, whoa, some middle ground here. So it's very common in athletes to have that. And because this question comes from Latin America, that's very, very important, that aspect of learning to do all those things as well. You know, learning to handle defeat, learning to handle failure. It's like, you failed, sure. You both know this phrase from Richard. Like he says, it's not like I haven't failed. It's like I failed faster than others. I mean, I think he says about mistakes. It's not like I don't make mistakes. It's like I make mistakes faster. To me, I fail it. Mistakes, to me, it's same thing, just depending on the definition for it. But it's like, you're gonna fail. You're gonna miss sometimes a shot. You're gonna fail the tennis shot. You're gonna lose a game. But just get over with it fast, and just get back on the horse, as the saying goes. And again, you're competing. And this goes about everything in life. I say this about relationships or everything. It's like, if you fall off the horse, you can't just be like, well, I will never fall in love again. Well, just get up in the horse again, which doesn't mean to have 100 different girlfriends the next week. Okay, guys, you got me? Latin American guys, you got me? I know we're lovely and so charming and lovable, but don't take advantage of that.
That I have a question from Miguel Layún Albarran, who is asking, especially what you are saying about the sports people in Mexico. But I think we can, I don't know if it's specific to Mexican people, or we can generalize. What happens when you have authentic warriors that doesn't dare to when they see adversity, they don't dare, they make themselves little, and they don't seize the opportunity to grab success. What happens there?
Yeah, well, first we have to mention a very popular hashtag many years ago in Mexico was "Todo es culpa de Layún." So
that it's not the same person.
Okay.
It's his father.
I know. I imagine it was the father. So first of all, is we have to blame someone, so we have to blame his son. Back then in the hashtag, todo es culpa de Layún, so everything is his fault. Now that's it. No, just kidding. Great player, his son, by the way. Not because he's him asking the question. I think so. I always thought so. I would say it has to go back to mentality, the beliefs. As I've mentioned, my friend who was number 3 in the world, Oliver Fernandez, one time he was the Davis Cup captain for the Mexican tennis team, and they were facing Argentina. At that time, he was just the captain. He was already retired. He was a businessman at the time. And he was interviewed before they traveled to Argentina. Argentina had 2 players in the top 20 in the world, and we had no one in the top 200 at that point. So it was pretty much obvious that Argentina was favored. And so they asked him, so what do you expect from the competition? And he said, we are going there to win. And the reporter laughed, said that, but you don't have the players to beat them. And he replied, if we're not going there to win, why the hell are we going? He had that attitude always. That's why even though he's a year younger than me, I always admire him from a young age, and I'm not ashamed of mentioning it. He knows this now as a businessman, and we get together every once in a while. His mentality was from a different planet to me, and it's not a different planet, it's a different culture in that sense. It was not a planet, it was about a culture. He always thought he could be on the top, whatever he was doing. He used to say in interviews, no one beats me twice in a row. And he would make that happen. I mean, he would lose to someone. He was lucky enough that when he played a number 1 in the world in professional, he never played him again. Or maybe the number 1 in the world was lucky that he never played over again, because he was not going to lose at that point, because he would give everything, but he would believe he was at that level. Just recently, as a businessman, there's a recording of him talking to someone else in blah, 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 whatever, for a big business here, implications with politics and blah, blah, blah. And I loved it when I heard the recording, because he's talking to a millionaire. They're talking about a multi-million business. And the other guy saying, like, I don't know what's going to happen with the new government. And this was before the elections of the last time. And he said to the guy, like, hey, engineer, like, take all those spider webs off your head. It's going to be okay. I mean, we'll handle whatever comes. And I was like, this is my friend. This is Oliver. I mean, he's not afraid of what's coming. However, I know many other athletes, and really warriors, as he's saying, very talented athletes, and that they like to fight, but they have certain beliefs in their mind that they're still like a tier below, like a lower level from the others. So if they face a certain level of competition, is like, yeah, but I had one player that this Mr. Layún knows. He used to play for America in Mexico, and then he went to Germany to play. And Pavel Pardo, he was from Mexican team. He was a good player and all. And when I was coaching in America, actually not the first team, but the underage player coaches for the players, he asked me a question. He approached me, and he was asking me a few things about this. And he said, like, see, when I was in Germany, I was upset. He said, because they would place on a wall who was the slowest running a certain distance on the team, and I was always the slowest, and I was upset that the coach would post it there. Like, why are you doing that to me? And it's like, it's not doing it to you. It's like, it was showing that you have to work harder on that, but he would make it personal. And he said to me, like, but I showed the coach that I was more talented than the other guys. Okay, sure. I was thinking, I get it, but maybe if you had worked on that, maybe you would not only have been a good representative of Mexico, but also worldwide. Like I have another example that Mr. Layún understands. I had a conversation with Carlos Vela some years ago. Carlos Vela, for people that don't know, it's one of the most talented football players in Mexican history, according to experts. I'm not because I am an expert. I am an expert in my field, but I talked to Ricardo Peláez and many other experts. So just so that Mr. Layún knows that I'm talking from expertise level. When I had a conversation with Carlos Vela, one time we were in the same flight to Europe, he expressed to me how he hates playing. A lot of people know this already. He's made it public. He doesn't like playing football. He's good at playing football. He doesn't like it. So he likes playing basketball. He likes going to basketball games. That's why he now plays in LA. He just hates football, but he's very talented at it. I was told by people that worked in the Arsenal team in England when he was there, that they had the evaluations. They thought he could be as good as Ronaldo or Messi. That's how they thought he was when he was 17, but he was too lazy. That was the report they had. And in that case, it's a little bit more severe than what he's asking, but it's still something in the beliefs. It's like, I don't need to work hard, as Pavel Pardo would say. Or Carlo was like, I don't like this. So sometimes these warriors, as he's mentioned, they are really good athletes, but they go to Germany or to the UK or other places that they make them work harder, and they already have excuses for that, or they have beliefs that don't allow them to do it, or it's like, well, it's harder, or I can't do this, or even if they are like, yes, I can do it, but he's stronger. Just look at him, he's taller, or he's this, or he's that. So as we all three know, neuro-linguistic programming is defined as the study of the structure of subjective experience. So that means every person might be slightly different or very different from each other. So we would have to analyze each case, but as a generalization, I would say it is about the beliefs. It's most people, most Mexicans and Latin Americans, and I would say this about every other place in the world, because of different aspects. It is about the beliefs that you are not at that same level. Like in Switzerland, there are certain beliefs that are installed in people. I'm sure. I haven't been there yet. It's one of those places I want to go sometime. But it's, at least worldwide, we know that Switzerland is known for certain things, and precision, and be neutral, as we say, and this and that. And all those things affect the people that live there. Just like in Mexico, we're all whatever, and they think about the siesta. And by the way, I have to have my siesta in half an hour, so just let's take this. Just kidding. But it's like, so it's so many cultural things sometimes affect the individuals in a way that is very unconscious. So the Mexican athlete it's a warrior, and it works hard, and but sometimes it's limited in certain areas. That's what people believe. I'm not saying it is true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but there's a belief about that. And so it generalizes in people's minds, in the athletes' minds, and so they have beliefs that they are not as efficient or as powerful. Now, there's another thing. I was just reminded of one time we lost to Argentina in the World Cup in the extra times, and Maxi Rodriguez, great goal, and blah, 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 blah. Argentina, as a generalization, has always believed that they are better than Mexico.
Yes.
So if they're tied, it's like, we're going to win. It's Mexico. We can't lose to Mexico. On the other side, they are going like, yeah, we can finally beat Argentina. It's tough, but we can do it. So it's a different mind frame. Talent is there. It happened with the Netherlands in another World Cup. They're winning, and then they go back and let's not lose, while the other team is going like, are we going to be losing to Mexico? Come on, guys, it's Mexico. So it is about a mindset, and sometimes you have to earn your right to be there, so that other people understand that you have that level. Like I just talking to someone yesterday for a corporate work, and it's people, they work in Nestle. We're talking, and I'm talking to people in Switzerland. Nestle is like a giant. It's a great thing. These people in Ecuador, the sales representatives, they go with medicals, doctors and stuff, because a regional lab now decided to create formula for babies. They're scared. And I was going like, wait, you're Nestle and your people are scared of a regional lab? Something's just not, I don't get it. And of course I eventually got it, but it's just a belief. The other guys do this and that. You're Nestle. I mean, it's just, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the way it's supposed to over there, but it's like, come on, guys, it's Nestle. It's like you're never gonna see players from Barcelona or Real Madrid going like, oh, we're playing Cadiz, I'm so scared. Come on, that's not gonna happen. It's like they can still lose, that happens, but what happens has to do with beliefs. So the Mexican athlete, Mexican football player, if we go specific to that sport, usually have a certain limiting beliefs at the unconscious level that are like, these guys are superior. They have excuses. They have more budget. They have more money for this, or they have this, or they have that. It's a lot of excuses. And so I would say that's one of the main reasons. And it happens all over the place. Like Switzerland, I'm pretty sure in certain sports, the athletes from Switzerland believe that they are in a lower level than for other countries, just because they are Switzerland. And that's understandable, but that's the whole thing, that it's limiting them. It's like, Nathalie, you know this story, when I decided to bring Richard Bandler to Mexico, people said like, he'll never come to Mexico. He doesn't care about Mexico. And I was going like, I'm not asking, I'm just stating what's going to happen. I'm going to bring him to Mexico. And his personal assistant at the time, Bram von Huyn, said like, Richard doesn't want to go to third world countries. I was like going like, okay, yet. He doesn't want to go to third world countries yet. It was just, how can I convince him to do it? I've been stubborn all my life. People say like, you'll never co-train with Richard, you'll never this, you'll never this, you'll never that. So I love it when people say you'll never, because it's more like, I go like, challenge. Okay, let's see. It's kind of like a challenge, exactly like a chip on my shoulder, as they say of Tom Brady and stuff. So it's, but that's not the rule. Most people will have that limiting. Like other NLP trainers back then would say, there were very few back then in Mexico, but they would say like, oh, that's just not going to happen. I mean, Richard is going to be too expensive. This can't be done. This can't be done. And so there's all throughout culture limiting ideas about what can be done. And I think that happens in many countries, not only Latin American countries. Probably doesn't happen in places like Germany, that they thought they have the superior race for a while. Well, actually, I don't know if they still think it. Now it's maybe not as public. Or the US, they always think that they are the best at everything. No, Americans. So that translates into the beliefs of many of the athletes. And so depending on the country, you're going to find certain limitations because of that. Like in Spain nowadays, is like they're the best place for tennis. For many years, they've been mentioning it. Then Rafael Nadal comes along, and then now Carlos Alcaraz, new number one in the world. And so now Spain has the reputation of the best tennis in the world. And that helps their own players, because that's what they feel. So I would say it has to do with beliefs.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's almost 2 hours, and it's actually very soon time for the siesta for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have to get my pillow and just go to sleep.
Yeah, so thank you so much for this time that you gave to us. Thank you.
It's absolutely fantastic to have the opportunity to chat like this with you, and I'm sure there will be more questions, and perhaps another time we can get together again and keep digging into this mindset of sports.
Absolutely. I think there's two different levels. I just want to end up with that. Like if we're talking about the coaches or even the neuro-linguistic programmer or the sports psychologist, we would need to go into deeper understanding of structures, meta programs, and the strategies and the pops. Sometimes the test and certain things and the operations. So that having more of a profound understanding of how to work with the athlete. When talking with people asking questions, athletes, parents, coaches, usually they don't have the whole training in terms of the structural understanding of it. And so we have to keep it at a certain level that it makes sense and it can be useful to understand. And I would entirely suggest to many of the people that watch this, if you are a sports coach, you're not involved into NLP or anything about the mind, is to learn from Michel and Nathalie. That would be a great choice about NLP, because even if you're not going to be the psychologist or the mental coach, understanding certain things are going to be very valuable. If you're the parent, also it's going to be very useful to understand your kids, to understand how it works. There's no magical recipes because people are different and the strategy they might have is different and the beliefs or the meta programs operating are different. And so it's by understanding that, it will make more sense some of the things that I mentioned about depending on the athlete, like the swimmer, if she's moving towards, moving away, or it's more similarities, differences. All those meta programs are going to be taken into account on how you treat them, how you help them to succeed. Citing Richard, quoting Richard from 1987, I believe it was, when he said, don't change meta programs. He said, it's understand them. Change them once you have a profound understanding of meta programs. Why am I saying this? Because a lot of people in NLP, even for those in NLP watching this later on, they go like, oh, this person is moving away from, let's just change it. Why? I mean, it's not a bad thing. John McEnroe used to, in his autobiography, he mentioned he would get motivated by moving away from. He would go like, oh, people are just going to make fun of me if I lose to this guy. He's just such a crappy player. I'm just going to be the fun in the news. So he would be scared of losing, and that would motivate him to win. And he was #1 in the world for 3 years. Andre Agassi, he negotiated with Nick Volaterri, his coach, when he was 15. He said, like, I don't want to go to school anymore. He said, like, okay, if you win the next tournament, you don't go to school. And so he won the next tournament. He was highly motivated. He didn't want to go to school. So do I suggest, he has a foundation now that he teaches, he gets people in school, I think it's over 500,000 Americans. He pays for school. He now believes in school. But back then, he skipped school. He wanted not to go to school. But the thing is, what motivates them is very different for one to another. So it's understanding those things, and that's going to be very useful. So any other time we get a chance, I'm happy to do it. And for anyone watching, again, these two individuals are a great option for learning NLP. Whether you're a parent, you're a coach, or you're the athlete itself. One important thing, if you are the athlete, it is about doing, it's not about thinking. Going back to the whole making the strike on the ball. It's useful to learn all these things, but just don't be on the court, on the course, on the swimming pool, on the soccer field. Just don't be thinking meta program strategies. Forget it. I did that. It doesn't work. It's, as the people said to me, stop thinking. If you're the athlete, just use what you're going to be learning. If you're the coach, if you're the parent, learn as much as possible from this, because you're going to help that way your, whatever it is, your son, your kid, or the athlete you're training. So thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you, Gabe. It was, as usual, fantastic.
And remember to subscribe to the channel. We'll have tons of other masterclasses and other content, which is very, very useful, related to NLP and strategies. And Thank you, Gabe.
My pleasure. Siesta time. Just kidding.
Bye-bye.
Perpetuating the whole idea that we have siestas. Anyway, my friends, I have a couple of friends that have siesta. Just fact for people. And they lived in the U.S. since they were 10 years old. They learned about siestas in the U.S., not in Mexico. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, Gabe.
Bye.